So I guess just to start with, would you guys both mind introducing yourselves?
Sure. James Ackley, I'm the audio director.
And I am Maclaine Diemer, and I'm the composer. I'm a composer, I should say.
So, could you talk like on a broad level about what you both individually do here, and in particular, you could talk about the vanilla release, or I'd be really interested to hear what your philosophy behind composing music and sound and those types of things for Heart of Thorns will be. The visuals, there's such a strong sense of visual aesthetics to the game that to keep the sound up to date must be difficult, or pace of that must be difficult.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, if I step back a little bit even and say, when we started this team a long time ago, the biggest push was try to be as immersive as possible, which meant trying to make sure that you didn't, in the thousands of hours that you can play the game, that you don't hear the same thing over and over. So we spent a lot of time, and we're still spending a lot of time on the tech that allows us to have variety in the way sounds play and when they play and how they play. But then in addition to that, we can't just use library sounds, because then you get one or two versions of any said sound that you're looking for, right? So we, from the beginning, were trying to get out in the field and record stuff here in the Foley room, or do things that meant that we'd have lots of variations and lots of sounds that people hadn't heard before. And then so that, coupled with the tech, meant that we were going to get, we would hope, a lot more mileage out of stuff before people started turning sound off, because it's very easy to, 1,000 hours of playing and hearing the same footsteps over and over, it's very easy to want to turn that off. So I think that was one of the, high level, that was one of the biggest pushes we did in the beginning, and we still try to do. And so Heart of Thorns is just another big step of new things that we have to figure out ways to make sound for, right? It's another new environment. It's all jungle type stuff, so figuring out ways to make jungle creature sounds. Jerry, one of the guys on the team, has spent a lot of time at Cabela's lately, which is a place where you go buy, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a place where you go buy, hunting type stuff, right? So he's gone there, and I don't even know how many animal call type things he's bought there. He's got at least 10 or 15, I think, at least now. Yeah. And he's become an expert at how to make these animal calls. But it means that now we have all this performance from animals that we would never get. Go try to get a pig to do what you want. They're
good luck.
Terrible, right? They're not used.
Let alone getting 100 different versions of it.
Right.
Or a sad one, or a happy one.
Yeah,
Show me a happy pig.
When you're stabbed, this is what happens. So anyway, so stuff like that, like trying to make new sounds from stuff that isn't really what you'd expect. Just figuring out ways to make those creatures every time sound new and different again, I think has been a tall order, but it's a good team. It's fun.
Excellent.
Yeah, so you kind of nailed it, right? Which is, my position is a little bit unique in that there's this whole body of work that's established as a very specific tone for the game that I had to kind of slide into, and I'm not Jeremy, and I don't write exactly like he does, but I have to make sure that the stuff that I do write sits alongside his, if not seamlessly, at least it's not totally
feels
incongruous,
consistent,
right? It's not like the Matrix soundtrack next to Star Wars or something. So it's. I'm not sure that I could even be in a better position to kind of grow as a composer the way I've been able to on the game, because like you said, Guild Wars, all the previous Guild Wars stuff in Guild Wars 2 is all Jeremy, and then there's this, there's certainly a large pool to draw on for inspiration, and then the way we've released content since Guild Wars 2 shipped has been kind of piecemeal, so it's like I get to try something, and I'll try something a little different, and try something different, rather than like, okay, now you're the guy, and we need 3 hours of music from you. That would have been a really daunting task a couple of years ago. So it's allowed me to grow really slowly, which I've been very appreciative of, because it allows me to kind of grasp onto new ideas and new inspiration, rather than be like thrown to the wolves and be like, okay, we need you to do exactly what he did, which when I took over the music, like totally, honestly, I couldn't have done, I don't think I could have sat there and written a 3-hour orchestral music soundtrack. So, yeah, I feel like I've been slowly growing as a composer. I feel like when the season, before we did season 2, there was a few bits and pieces in season 1 that were still kind of me like getting my feelers, you know. And then when we got into season 2 is when I really felt like, okay, I'm warmed up, right? Like I'm ready for a little bit more here.
This is me now.
Yeah, yeah. And also I should say that I'm not even the only guy doing it, right? There's also Leif Chappelle, who's a designer, and he's done some music for me as well. And then we have a kind of third party, like independent guy his name is Stan Lepard, and he's written some stuff, but he's also helped me with all of the orchestration and score prep and all that stuff when we started recording live. So the three of us kind of comprise this team, and you know, I would say that in terms of just raw composition, I probably take care of 75 to 80% of it, and then those guys help me with a little bit, and then Stan does some of the behind the scenes logistics. Anyway, I got off on a tangent. So season 2 was a chance to grow a little bit as a composer and also pull things a little bit further away from where the game had been. I think it was, you know, we'd had this new area, the desert area, and like it was up to me to kind of establish a tone for that, which I thought was good because then I didn't have to feel like I was copying, like, how would Jeremy write this piece, right? I could just sort of
how would I write this piece?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, what inspires me? Like, when I look at this map, how do I feel, and how can I translate that into, you know, an hour's worth of music for you to spend running around and you know, feel like it's complementing the visuals or your experience as a player. And then with the Heart of Thorns stuff, it's just kind of more of the same, except now it really is on that big scale. Now it really is like, okay, we need hours of hours of music.
We need the entire thing.
Yeah, yeah, but it's also come, like I said, it's come at the right time where I feel ready to tackle that, whereas I didn't even 6 months to a year ago. So, and because it's not the Living World stuff, which is just an extension of the vanilla game. It's a new thing, and it's even bigger of a new area, and everybody's sort of trying their best to make it feel different and add new, just everything. Every department is trying to spice things up. It's a chance for me to establish something even more probably different than the previous releases have been. So, it's a tough balance for me because I'm trying to get away from cliche jungle stuff. I really don't want it to just be all bamboo flutes and drums and that kind of thing. There will be some of that, as there has to be, because it has to have that kind of primitive vibe. But
people have that psychological expectation.
Yeah, like what does a jungle sound like? And you know, you're fighting against 100 years of movies and TV shows and games,
like social conditioning of this is what a jungle sounds like.
Yeah. But I'm doing my best, and I think it's coming along. I like the direction that things are kind of heading in, and it's still more different than Guild Wars has been in the past, but it'll fit alongside musically where it's been.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, to focus on music for a second a little more too, I heard last night too. So you shifted to a lot of live recording now. So the original Guild Wars 2 soundtrack, which kudos on you all for releasing a soundtrack, was a lot of library stuff, right? And
yeah, it's all so. Jeremy has all the original Guild Wars and expansions and all Guild Wars 2 and all the music up through Season 1 is all like sample-based, you know, sample library instruments. And the thing is, sorry, was there more to that question or did I cut you off?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. So Jeremy has like his own special setup that he uses, as do a lot of composers. You know, you get to a position where you can kind of, you know how you write and you have the money to go hire an orchestra to kind of create your own sample libraries that are custom based on the sounds that usually, I'm just assuming based on what I know of his music, and what I've heard, but I'm pretty sure this is how it goes. A lot of guys at that high level, they use a mix of commercially available libraries and custom recorded sample libraries to fit their needs. And he has a very specific sound, you know, which he has pretty well dialed in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and like I can't duplicate that. I can do my best, you know. And there's the level that software is at now is unprecedented in the history of, you know, musical technology, and that you could probably fool about 95% of the public depending on how much work you're willing to put in. But I thought it was making this jump, I thought it would be a really great opportunity to take things up to the next level, right? Like, if you go back even and play the starting maps in the game versus the maps that we've introduced in the living world, you can see how much better we've gotten at making content, right? And I thought, well, musically, we need to kind of elevate on the same level, and really the next logical step is to just pony up for the real thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's worked out spectacularly. It's certainly it's expensive, which is always the biggest fear, and that's probably why most people don't do it, because it's not just me buying me a computer and some software and putting me in a room by myself and letting me go at it. You have to hire. There's a lot of logistics. There's a lot more people involved, and
you have to do that too.
What's that?
You have to put you in a room locked.
Oh yeah, I have to do all that
in addition
and
to
also
the room
hire,
locking.
Yeah. But it wasn't. I felt like I didn't have to. It didn't feel like an uphill battle. Every time it was kind of brought up to James or anybody else that was sort of in charge, everybody was on board. And then once we started getting back the mixes and getting feedback, especially from fans, it was clear that that was the right decision, and there'll certainly be more of that with Heart of Thorns. Excellent.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the benefits of the game being a success too. Is you probably have more leeway to spend a little bit on the audio component, I would think.
I would hope so. Yeah, I mean, we are. I think we're pretty well regarded in the company. Like, we're appreciated, and people at the kind of higher level, like, they appreciate us. I don't want to kind of repeat myself, but basically, some people don't care about audio, right? And
yeah,
I'm not accusing anybody here, but it's just. It's often an afterthought for a lot of people, both people that make games and people that play games. Not everybody, but for a lot of people, it's kind of an afterthought. And I don't think any of us feel that way here. I think the reason we're even here is because they care about audio. Like, they could have just outsourced it all and put in the bare minimum amount of effort, but they really wanted to make it just as special as the visual component,
Yeah, well, that was why I was so excited to get to come and step into the Foley room and stuff. I was like, wow, this is awesome. They have an audio office. That's that's exciting to me.
It's very rare, very rare.
Yeah, well, I've been to a few studios, and even like bigger studios, it's like, here's the audio room. It's like a closet, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Here's where we keep that audio guy.
Here's where we keep that guy.
We don't know what he does.
He does something.
Sits over here.
Yeah.
So. This is probably an easier question. So the original Guild Wars 2 actually had a soundtrack release, a 4-disc one, which is, in Japan, there's this sort of trend where a lot of games get soundtrack releases, especially a lot of like East Asian games and stuff. Mm-hmm. And in the West, it's getting more popular. But we were really impressed that Guild Wars 2 got that 4-disc, really nice packaging and stuff, like a full physical soundtrack release. I guess this is a 2-part question. A, should we expect that for Heart of Thorns? And B, what sort of, input goes into that packaging type thing? Like, do you all get to, think about how it's going to be produced as a soundtrack and as, like, an actual item, that sort of thing?
That's a good question. Well, we actually had nothing to do with the soundtrack release.
Really. Oh, really?
Yeah, that was all Jeremy's company, and if you want, you can do some Googling and you'll find people's opinions about how that whole thing went. I have a copy of that soundtrack, and I think it's great. I listen to it a lot. You think I would get enough of that music here, but I do listen to it. That's all kind of him. He negotiated that as part of his deal. But it did set a precedent, right? Like, I obviously believe in the music, and I think that it's valuable. And the intention is to release the music in some format. There's plans that are vague, which I probably shouldn't speak on, but it'll come out. How it will come out, I'm not entirely certain yet, but I would like it to be in the best kind of presentation possible.
So it's something that has at least been discussed.
Oh yeah, and even if it wasn't, it'd be something that I would be. I'm trying to get the season 2 stuff released, and it's like,
please
before
do.
people forget, they're like, oh yeah, Heart of Thorns. I'm like, yes, but
remember this other stuff?
Yeah, that's coming, and hopefully soon. But I'm the squeaky wheel when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Good.
Yeah.
But like you said, I mean, this is the best time to get any sort of negotiation for music stuff, because we're getting great reviews. People are hearing it. We're the money spent is now shown that it's worth it. So it's getting the attention, like he says. Everybody sees the value in it. So I don't think there's anybody here that would say, no, we're not going to spend any time or money on, releasing this music or making sure that people can hear it in some way or another. It's just figuring out how and what, and all that stuff. But it seems like everybody is really happy, and so it's easy. I mean, yeah, he ends up being the squeaky wheel, but that's just because there's lots of things going on. It's not because people aren't caring about it.
Yeah, well, and especially with an MMORPG where, you're having these living world updates, and it's sort of like, with like Final Fantasy XIV, they have their patches, and, adding additional music, it's like, how do we release this? We're going to be releasing more music in a few months.
Yeah.
So that you all have the ability to do that, I think is great. So, and clearly it sounds as though the people playing the game also are wanting that. So, I was on your SoundCloud page, or the Guild War, the ArenaNet SoundCloud page, which looked like... And, just listening through all the tracks and reading the comments, and it's clear that this is something people want. And
totally. Yeah. The season 2 stuff is a different beast because it was released over the span of 8 or 10 months. So it's hard to release. People wanted to release as soon as we put out the first 5 pieces. I'm like, well, just wait. There's a lot more coming.
Yeah.
But this one, it lends itself better to a proper release in some format. So it will happen.
Excellent. So this is more of an audio type question, but in the case of a game like Guild Wars 2, which is constantly evolving, what is the audio pipeline like for that? Do you see what you're making audio for in advance? Do you get a list of, we need 5 ogre screeches, and that sort of thing? Do you get a written description? Do you get a visual, or do you sort of help create, for example, if you need to make a fireball sound? What is that process like of creating sound, and how does it interact with the rest of the creation process?
So seems like a cop-out answer, but it's all of those things, right? We get kind of pre-warnings of, we're going to be going into this type region. A long time ago, we got told we're getting the next region's going to be jungle type region, and we're going to have things like this or whatever. So our minds start going with how we're going to fill that regional type sounds, all the things that would go along with that, be it just ambience or creatures or whatever, the kind of stuff with that. And then we start getting story that outlines, okay, well, the story arc is going to do these things, and the main narrative is going to be this, and so that might tell us, okay, this creature is going to be the most important one, or this one maybe, or so we start getting kind of warnings about that kind of stuff coming. And then it's we play with all the designers and stuff as often as we can. We don't always. They'll make lists of things that they're working on. Obviously, a designer, an animator, an effects artist, world map creators. They have their task list to make, and so we get kind of some lists based on that stuff. If an animator is going to make a creature, we know he's going to make a creature, we're going to need sounds for them. Is he going to be an intelligent creature? Okay, well then that means there's a certain set of sounds that we know we need to make if he's going to be somebody you can fight, versus just an NPC that's going to wander around, or it's just going to be like the chicken or something that just dies or something, or whatever. And so we'll get kind of lists based on that, and then once it gets put into the map, once it gets put into kind of a playable environment, then we kind of reassess at that point, and a lot of times find that stuff that they had planned to put in maybe isn't in there, or stuff that they didn't think they needed all of a sudden is in there. So we get surprised probably more often than we'd like, but a lot of times the surprise is them telling us, which is nice. Sometimes it's us finding it, but in the end, I think probably, I don't know, a lot of the people get that in order for their thing that they've put a lot of effort into it, be it an effect or an animation or a map, it needs the sound to kind of help sell it. So there's very few people that will just completely disregard that and forget, until the very last second when they put it in and realize that it's dead silent.
This doesn't work without any audio.
Yeah. So for the most part, yeah, it's working with the designers, be it the original pre-scope to story narrative to creating the thing to putting it all together in some sort of playable place. And then once it's all in there, then we start adding our stuff, and then we start having play sessions with as many people as we can to where we find out, is the thing fun, and if not, can sound help that, or is it hurting in any way? A lot of times we'll put sounds in and think that, that maybe we think the thing is going to act like X, and we put a sound associated with it, and then we find out that it reacts entirely differently. Maybe, the thing runs, or the thing can be hit over and over and over, and so all that sound that we thought was going to fire once is all of a sudden playing a bunch. Or we thought it was neat to have one in a box level, and it sounded amazing, and then we go in the map and we find out that they've layered 20 all right next to each other. And we're like, okay,
they're all making it
it's crazy loud and overwhelming, and so that's the kind of stuff that we just have to work with them and adapt and grow with them, kind of thing. So I think the communication obviously is, that's key to any kind of relationship, right? But being able to just go over there and talk to them is key. And a lot of them come over and talk to us too. A lot of them have gotten to the point where they're comfortable enough with us where they come over and say, hey, I'm putting in X and I want you to come have a look at it. And so just the communication, I think, is probably the key part there. But yeah, so not any one thing.
But still, it sounds like a great process, though.
Yeah, I mean, it works really pretty good. I mean, I think the game is just really big, right? I mean, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people here creating content, and there's not nearly as many of us as there is them, and all of the other disciplines affect us in some way or another, right? So there's hundreds of other people working on stuff, and there's, we have, if you break it down for like people that are making stuff and people that are putting it in the game, excluding music, we have 2 or 3 people making sounds. We have 2-ish people putting sounds in. We have 1 person testing it, and we have 1 person organizing all of that as a producer. And then, there's some overlap and some extras, like I'm not really counted in there because I end up doing marketing videos and kind of wrangling other stuff and helping when I can, but I get so scattered in other stuff that they can't count on me for anything, right? So it's a relatively small team, even though it's a pretty big team, but the company's so big, I think, is and the pace that we're putting stuff out. Certainly there for a while, it was pretty fast. The 2-week thing was pretty heavy. So we got pretty good at banging stuff out, and then now we're 2.5, coming on 3 years since we've launched. So the library that's in the game is pretty big at this point, and the stuff that you can create just procedurally in the game by stacking stuff and having it implemented in creative ways, we get a lot of mileage out of stuff. The implementers have gotten so good at reusing stuff from our library, and we've gotten better, I think another key point would be that we build sounds now more with that in mind, that we're just adding to a library that is for all the things in the future that we would ever need, right? So less about the specific event. I mean, there was times in the past where even the file name was named the item that it was to go with, right? And then we realized that we were multi-purposing those so much that it's like, don't call it the thing, just call it rock explosion, and then if you want to use it for whatever, it ends up getting used for that, And
that's
so
really cool.
Multi-purpose and procedurally build stuff as much as we can, I think, and I think that's probably key to it as well, because we couldn't have done the 2-week thing without repurpose and figuring out creative ways to implement stuff. I mean, Maclaine, before he was doing music, was our props guy. I mean, he was the guy that had to figure out how to make a new gate open or a new thing bang and explode and whatever out of all those same library stuff. And that was, I don't know, 2 years ago or something. So
2, 3, 4 years ago. That was kind of when we first decided that we can't have one-to-one. Everything has a unique sound in the game, or else we'd probably ship it we'd be shipping it 3 years from now.
Yeah, with 4 gigs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool, though. It's sort of like you have these creative constraints that actually end up producing really interesting work, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's the exact same way as anybody works in linear music, right? I mean, you go to WB or something, or any big house that makes movies or TV, and they have a gigantic library. I mean, they record some, specific sounds for whatever the thing is. Like Godzilla got new Godzilla sounds, right? But I bet you they did not do brand new footsteps or brand new wind sound. Or, I mean, maybe they did, but a lot of those houses just go back to their library for the basic kind of foundation stuff and repurpose and reuse in ways that maybe it wasn't originally designed for.
Basically a tool set at that point.
Yeah, and so they have a little more leeway than we do, but I think that's been the key for us, is just figuring out ways to not only use but set up the library so that it can be used in a multi-purpose kind of way.
Very cool.
Can I say too that I said earlier about Cabela's? Like there was another thing I was thinking about that Jerry and Drew also did. Every 2 weeks they have something new in there. So I know that they did a plunger. You know, if you think about weird things that make sounds that you wouldn't think would be a creature, this was actually something I suggested. They're going to PAX with trivia questions. Mm. They asked for trivia questions, and one of them was, what was the plunger used for? What creature was it used for?
Yeah.
But they took a plunger and they started with putting it in water and getting the kind of suction sound that you get. And then Drew started making plaster. Like he basically made goopy plaster so that it was heavy enough that you'd get the suction sound of the plunger coming out. And this is like a big plastic, big plunger. And then they started compiling all kinds of new stuff in this goop that it wouldn't harden, because that was the problem. You couldn't actually use plaster because then it would start to harden, right? Like you had to have it some sort of elasticity that would maintain, for hours of testing and making sounds for. But then during like this spitting and gurgling and like you push in and all the bubbles would come out and it would, all this, and it was just stuff like that. I think is awesome. That's the kind of stuff that our library is full of.
That's really cool. That was actually my next question too. Was can you tell an interesting audio story? So
yeah, I mean
the bass too, the Jerry's upright bass that we were.
Yeah.
It's still set up in there?
Yeah. And that's an easy one to open. Look, here's a creature.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, all kinds of stuff. Like we've done dry ice stuff. We've done. Obviously, you saw the toilet was shattered in there. We got. I guess that was one I always talk about when I give a tour. Is that the toilet was, it ended up being big chunks of glass basically at some point, and then it was walking around on it, walking on glass chunks, and then. The more we did that, the more it broke down, and then it was like smaller and smaller rubble until it was just a bunch of really small debris. And then somebody, I don't know who it was, brought in the bucket full of sand, grabbed a handful of sand and poured the sand over the now shrapnel of glass ceramic, and it sounded like fairy dust. It sounded like what movies make fairy dust sound like.
Tinkerbell flew through, right?
It just sounded, because it was all the multiple harmonics hitting, all the tinkling of the hundreds of different pieces of grains of sand hitting all the different types of glass, and it was just it sounded like fairy dust. And it was one of those, we did not set out to do that. It just happened.
Yeah, we're just gonna smash a toilet and then
see what we get.
Yeah.
So does that have? That seems like that sounds pretty cool. Does that you sometimes you won't even be attempting to make a particular sound, but you'll end up with, hey, look what we made from this.
That's it all the time. You go into it with thinking, okay, we're going to get glass shattering sounds. In fact, I have a great picture of Maclaine with that toilet. It was you swinging it, wasn't it? Or was it? You were in there, wasn't it?
I was, yeah. I can't remember if I smashed it or not. I've smashed the TVs. We smashed a couple TVs.
Maybe it was Jerry Drew that was swinging it. But anyways, there's a shot because we always put whenever we do big stuff like that, we end up sticking the GoPro in there so we can capture it. But yeah, we'll go into it with, we're going to get thick glass shatterings, and then we get fairy dust out of it, or we get dropping and crumbling, and did that get used for all the branded footsteps?
That, I think, was the TV. The first TV that we smashed.
That's right.
Because TV, old tube TVs, have really thick glass for the screen. So I had one that I moved here with, and I just was like, well, I don't need to keep this. So we smashed it. Not here. This was before we moved into this building, but we smashed it at Drew's, home studio. And then I didn't know this, but the glass is it's 3/4 of an inch thick. It's super thick, which you get. If you drop a glass, a drinking glass, it's really thin and then it sounds thin, right? But if you have huge chunks of this really thick glass, it just feels heavier. So we did a lot, you put on gloves, obviously, and you sort of rustle it around, and then same thing, just step on it, and that's what I think most of the branded stuff is.
You're right, because that was a while ago. That was obviously for ships. So.
Yeah. It's the brand the purple, glassy, areas.
You gotta smash TVs for the sake of art. I get it.
Yeah. Twice we've smashed them.
Yep. They're so chemically toxic, though, that I think we've veered away from it a little bit now. It's all right, we got plenty of that. Let's not push our
Let's reuse that later.
Yeah.
So my last question's pretty easy. How much music do you think is planned for Heart of Thorns? Would it be comparable to what was put in the original ship of the vanilla game, or is it a little bit scaled back, or are you still sort of nailing it down?
Yeah, well, there's gonna be at least as much as season 2 had, which I can't remember. It's like about an hour, but I what I want is more, right? Like the problem with MMOs is that you play them for so long that things get repetitive really quickly, and music is one of them. And a lot of people turn it off or just put on iTunes in the background, and I totally understand that. But I'd like to push that back for people, as far as possible. So I'm aiming for somewhere between what season 1 had on the low end and what the original game shipped with. But, the difference is if the expansion has what the original game shipped with, that's still more sort of per capita amount of music, right? Because the game is so big and actually has, in my opinion, not enough music by a fairly large margin, right? But if the expansion is not quite that big in scope content-wise, but has the same amount of music, then you're kind of getting more. So that's...
Each moment to moment is more likely underlaid with some original music.
Yeah. So I think there's going to be... My guess is we'll probably get close to 2 hours. I don't want to say 2 hours because that's really ambitious, and I have to write that,
But you're crossing your fingers.
Yeah, if it gets up there, then I'll be happy, It'll definitely be more than an hour, and hopefully close to 2. And there'll be a lot more, specific, just sort of customized music. It's not like... There'll be less generic stuff that is kind of used to plug gaps, right? It's like each map I want it to feel very different. There'll be special cinematics. There'll be...
That are sort of tied into that moment in particular.
Big story moments, not even cinematics, but just like you discover a new area and this whole thing plays. So boss fights, there's going to be all sorts of new stuff. A lot.
More tailored for the region, I think is what he's trying to say, too. Right? I mean, maybe that's what you did say. I don't know if that came across, but yeah, I mean, less like... music that is just cool and sort of would work there, but more like he has done already with the Living World stuff. Like every time we do a release for that, it was, how does this zone make me feel? How do I want to make the people feel? When this happens, do I want to change their emotion in this way or that way or whatever? So working more in that kind of style where it's, the music was written for this area, for these events, for this, for the emotion that we're trying to get on that, as opposed to...
Sad song.
Here's one piece that works for that, and then here's 4 others that don't break that immersion.
Right.
Or, and they work fine.
Right, but you've heard you might hear them elsewhere in the game.
Yeah. But because, like what he said, the amount of music we had for the ship game wasn't enough to get that same, specific things for each type of region or each event and stuff. So that's the hope.
And what's interesting too is among MMOs for the launch version, I actually think you all had quite a bit of music. I don't know, like for example, to mention World of Warcraft, they have a fair bit of music. They have Russell Brower, and their music is great. But I've always felt that when I'm playing Guild Wars, there is more of a focus on audio, and so it's really interesting that you still feel that there's not enough. I mean, I always want more, but it's really interesting like that it's so dense and that you always feel like you could have more.
Yeah, and that's the advantage of doing an MMO too, is that we can just keep putting stuff in. I don't really go back to the old maps and put new stuff in there because there's so much new stuff we have to kind of work on, but. At the very least, it's like from, the point where we started Living World releases going forward, it's just more, always more, and it'll always be new to somebody, but there's always somebody who's played 1,000 hours and, they're sick of it. So I'm always kind of I'm always targeting towards somebody who's sick of whatever has gone before and like me, like I've heard everything in the game 10 billion times. I want some new stuff, so that's kind of who I aim for.
Well, and I think too, this goes back to what I originally said with Drew and I started, we wanted to make this game sound like the ways that the games that we'd worked on before, which were, you can finish in a weekend or something. And so we sort of, maybe whether it was a good idea or not, we certainly tried to make it as big and immersive as every kind of other kind of, like I say, weekend kind of console game or something.
Yeah, like an adventure game that you can blow through in 15 hours.
And so the same thing for the music stuff is the same thing. And I mean, he wants it to feel as involving and as overwhelming as all those games are musically and sound-wise, And then you say, okay, well, now you can play it for 1,000 hours. Okay, that's where the problem is. But that's what we've been working hard to try to figure out solutions for, with the procedural sounds and with more music recorded and then more creative ways of using the music in the game too. So. Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, I think, is that fair to assume that you've kind of gone after it with the same interest as Drew and I did originally, which was just, let's make it as big and cool as any of the blockbuster games that are a weekend blow through kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Aim for the highest kind of production value that you can, regardless of, how bored somebody might get of it after the 10 billion. But that's such an extreme case, right? So think of it as a finely curated experience.
Yeah, and regardless of the genre too, I think that was the part that originally when I started talking to people about doing music for MMOs, it was always, the bar is sort of in a different place, and people sort of expect it to be like something different, and that was what Drew and I'm glad to hear Maclaine's kind of the same path is. It doesn't have to be like that. It's still a game. Let's don't call it a genre separation or whatever. You're going to play a game. You're going to play a game.
Think about it purely as an experience, not this is the kind of experience.
Right. Yeah, it should be fun. Whether you're going to watch a movie or a TV show or play a game, it should be like playing a game. So figuring out ways to. Obviously, we just have some technical hurdles that maybe other people wouldn't have, but a game would have that versus a movie. A movie is so controlled into a 2-hour thing that it's completely linear. Ultimate control, so ours just happens to have a little bit more that we have to fill. But I don't know, same target anyways.
Excellent.